memorable capture. There's a few that stick in the head from over the years. One in particular is quite funny actually. It was fishing over on the RK Leisure Horton complex. It was over on the boat pool, and I'd just done the night. I'd fished in a swim called Dugout 2. My mate Scotty was fishing in Dugout 1. We didn't have anything. It was a blank night, and packed up in the morning and went and put the bottom rods in the car, and it was going to be a day like it is today, nice and hot, nice and sunny. So I got the floater gear out of the car, and I spent most of the day just wandering up and down the bank trying to get one off the top. The birds were an absolute nightmare. I remember I was spomming out mixers, starting to get the fish going, and the seagulls had moved in and the birds had moved in, and I'd all but given up really. And it's sort of getting towards the late afternoon, the sun was starting to go down a bit, and I found 3 or 4 fish sat in a weed bed in front of a swim called the Secret Swim. It didn't really get fished a lot. It was sort of solid weed up to about 15 yards, but it brought the fish quite close into the bank. So I went down there, and you know, I was putting out a few mixers trying to get them going, but they were sat under the weed and they weren't really taking much notice of them. But I did notice there was one tiny hole. It was sort of just about the size of a carp's mouth that a fish kept sticking its head up through. So I took off the controller, and I had a bit of crusty loaf, so I literally just tackled the rod up with just a single hook and a nice big bit of crusty Kingsmill loaf. I've cast past the area and reeled this bit of crust right back, and it's managed to come straight into the hole. And I mean, like, the hole's like probably the size of about a sinkhole. If you imagine sort of a sinkhole, it was a tiny hole, but a fish just kept putting its mouth up for it every now and again. I managed to get the bread right in that hole, and it was there probably 10-15 minutes, and it was starting to go soggy now, and I was just about to think about reeling it in when a fish just come up out of nowhere and just engulfed it. And I just remember hitting it, striking it, and it's just gone off like gone right out through the other side of the weed, real thick weed, and the whole the weed bed sort of moved with it as it went out. And I managed to slow it down and gain a bit of line back on the reel, and obviously bring it in. And as I was bringing it in so far, it just rammed up against the weed. So now I've got this fish, it's locked solid behind the weed bed, probably 15 yards out into the pond. There's nothing I can do. All while this is going on, Scott's over the other side, and obviously he's seen that I've hooked into one, so he's come running round the lake full pelt. He's got round to me like he's absolutely knackered, out of breath, and I was like, yeah mate, it feels like a good fish. Like, there was nothing we can do. It was solid. This fish was absolutely solid. And then I just remembered that they were over in the swim where Scotty had been fishing, there was this like weed rake that one of the cat anglers had made up as a bloke called Marbles. Really nice bloke, mad as a box of frogs, but he came up with this about 15-foot long weed rake, and that swim where Scotty was kind of like, it was like Marbles' swim. It was the only swim he really fished on the lake every time he come down. So obviously I was a bit younger than Scotty, so he sent me back round for the weed rake, and he's kept hold of the rod, and I've sprinted it round there, managed to get this thing out the swim. It's about 15 foot long, walked it all the way round to where we were fishing, but the thing is, it wasn't light. So I've now took the rod back. Scotty, who's a big bloke, he's got hold of this weed rake, and he's chucking this, and I mean, it's not on a rope, it's on a pole. He's chucking this pole out into the lake, into this weed, and it's really heavy. We're just breaking the weed off slightly around the fish, and he done a great job. And we managed to literally, as he was pulling it back, I was just gaining a tiny bit of line on the reel. He just kept doing it and doing it. We must have done this probably 15 times in the end, until the end. All I had in front of me was just a great big weed bed. I couldn't even see if the fish was still on, to be honest. Scotty stood next to me with a net, and we started pulling this weed back, and then eventually I've said, we're going to just put it all in the net. So we've just put this massive bit of weed all into the net, still looking in it, and they can't even really see if there's still a fish in it. So as we're peeling back the weed like that, oh yeah, there's definitely a fish, there's a tail. And as we're pulling it back, this fish is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just eventually the fish, you know, it was a real long fish. Didn't have much of a belly on it because it was spawned out, but it was a fish known as the flat-tailed common, which any boy that knows that fish, it's like a real nice long fish. And got the weed back off, and I've chucked it all out the net, and we've obviously seen this fish, and it's the flat-tailed common. Like, Scott's gone, you got the big common, like shouted it, like, and I said, bloody hell Scott, keep your noise down, you'll have everyone round here. And yeah, so he's got this fish in the net, and I said, look mate, I'm going to go sort the mat out and the scales and the camera. And obviously Scott's put the net at the front of the swim and started to walk back as well, and this fish has just gone boom, and it's dragged my landing net across the gravel of the swim, probably sort of 4, 5, 6 foot. And Scott's managed to come down and just literally put his hand and his foot on the landing net. It was like, this fish really, really powerful. Obviously got it back. I said, right Scott, you keep hold of that now. And yeah, obviously I got the mat and the camera and that sorted out. And if I remember right, I think it was just under £35. Really, really nice fish. Not a mark on it, but it was a bit low in weight, spawned out. I think it's usually sort of like high 30s, sort of late autumn, early winter and that. So, but yeah, like that, just basically I wouldn't have landed that fish if Scott hadn't been there, or someone hadn't been there to get that, use the weed rake like they did. And I'll always remember that, because it was a real team effort to land that fish. And we got some nice photos, and there's one that always makes me chuckle, is I'm doing the self takes on the bank, and Scott sort of jumps in behind the camera like that, and just at the right time. And yeah, I'll always remember that catch. It was good times. I enjoyed me fishing over on Horton.